A few years ago, I used to have terrible movement. Like, I was pretty bad. But after many months of frustration, I figured out how to use my movement to win more of my gunfights, and I'm now able to play solo versus quads in really sweaty lobbies. I also sometimes get death cons from my opponents like this.
You are in.
Well, the journey to get to this point wasn't easy, so today I'm sharing with you 7 fatal movement mistakes that I learned the hard way, including one major reason why slide canceling is sometimes the worst thing you can do in this game. Now, one of the common questions that I get when I stream is how do I know when to use a certain movement? If I'm in a gunfight, I can slide cancel, I can jump shot, or I can even drop shot. So how do I know which movement to choose? Well, to answer this, we need to look at mistake number 1, and it's a common mistake that I see lots of high-level players make. If we think about a gunfight, we want to hit enough shots to get it down, but we also want to take as little damage as possible so that we can stay alive. What this means is we want to stay out of what I call a player's kill zone. That's the center of their screen. Now, if we think about this from a logical standpoint, the further you are from your enemy's center of screen, the better, with the best place being behind them. This is why slide canceling around a corner as someone is approaching it can be so effective. Now, this might all sound obvious, but it can get kind of complicated because your enemy's kill zone will constantly be changing as they try to track your movements, and one mistake can lead to disaster. But before we get into the more complicated stuff, let's look at a simple example. If someone is camping a corner, I could slide cancel out and take the gunfight, but the problem is I might also take a lot of damage if I end up sliding directly into where they're aiming. Now, on the other hand, if I jump challenge this corner, I go way over this player's crosshair and out of their line of sight. This means I have a lot more opportunity to deal damage before they're able to aim at my character. Or I could not do either of these things, and instead I could drop shot at the edge of the wall and strafe out the peak near the bottom of the drop shot. You have to remember that a player's kill zone isn't just from side to side, it's also up and down. Drop shots are extremely effective when you're close to an enemy because you drop out of the center of their screen, and the closer you are to them, the further they have to move their aim to shoot you. They don't work nearly as well when you're far from your enemy. Now, if we look at a more complicated example, in this clip, I'm challenging a player coming up the prison stairs, and even though I surprise him, I almost die. But why? Well, after I slid out past him, his aim was completely behind my character model, but then I made the mistake of strafing back into his bullets. Changing directions in a gunfight can be very effective to confuse your opponent and make them miss shots, but you have to remember that when you do it, you'll likely be crossing back through the enemy's kill zone. So when you change directions, you want to be sprinting, jumping, or sliding to take as little damage as possible in the kill zone because strafing and shooting is so slow. One move that I use all the time is to slide cancel one way and then jump back the other. This at least elevates my character model to take less damage. Now, you always want to avoid your enemy's kill zone when possible, but you also don't want to make this next mistake. But first, how would you like to improve your accuracy to hit more of your shots and hear your enemy's footsteps more clearly through the walls? Well, let me introduce you to today's video sponsor, FPS Hub. They're a team of experts that specialize in optimizing your computer's performance to deliver maximum FPS in your favorite games, as well as improving your audio experience. Now, a few months ago, I was really struggling to enjoy playing Warzone. My frame rate was choppy, and I could barely hear any footsteps, so it wasn't a very fun experience. So I reached out to FPS Hub, and there's a reason why they are the experts. They significantly improved my average frame rate, but what I didn't expect was they reduced the input lag in my system, so my controller now feels more responsive than it ever has, which has helped me perform better in the game. They also customized my audio so that the footstep sounds are louder, while non-important sounds are much more quiet. Now, Warzone's audio is really bad, so there isn't a magical fix to make the game's engine produce more accurate sounds, but this enhancement has definitely made a big difference. But the best part of all is that FPS Hub is committed to quality. They run a full system stability test with one-on-one aftercare to make sure that your PC is stable, and they offer 2-week warranties on all optimizations, as well as a money-back guarantee if they can't improve your PC's performance, so there's very little risk to signing up. FPS Hub did my computer's optimization free of charge as part of this sponsorship, but I got about a 25% increase in frames for what would be less than 5% the cost of my PC, so I wouldn't hesitate to pay for this service in the future. You can book your appointment today on their website with a link in the description, and you can use code DREAMSTRIKE for $15 off your order. I want to give FPS Hub a huge shout out for sponsoring this video, and now let's get on to the next fatal movement mistake. And to illustrate it, let's look at this clip here. I'm playing solo quads and I see a guy run into this room. Well, as I slide cancel into the room, I'm surprised by his teammate also being there. So I quickly run out and pop a stim to reposition, and once I hear that there's only one player chasing me, I go to challenge him and I get the kill. I also kill the other guy a few seconds later. So what was the important thing that I did there? Well, I didn't slide too far into the room, so I was able to quickly reposition when I saw there were 2 players. You see, when I started to learn movement a few years ago, I thought it was all about full sending everything and breaking people's cameras. But what I found out was that when I hopped into a game and I ran around like a madman, I just got destroyed by more patient players on the map. And the reason this happens is because this is a battle royale. The map is huge and people can be anywhere. Even the best players in the world get surprised all the time by someone being somewhere they don't expect. And on top of all of that, the time to kill is really fast, so running one extra step away from your cover can make a difference. So how do we avoid dying like this? Well, we play for information. If I'm playing near this wall and I think someone might be on the other side of it, I could slide cancel far out from the wall, but now I have no cover around me. Instead, if I play close to the wall, I can now peek both sides and I can even mantle over the top depending on the situation. Or if I'm playing at a window, I don't want to commit to jumping into the building, and so I have information that it's safe on the other side. The small amount of extra time that it would take to jump back through the window if I find myself in trouble could be enough for me to get downed. That's why the best movement players don't overcommit from cover until they have good information. I had heard this guy outside, but when I went to challenge him, my centering was way off. But because I didn't commit and jump out of the window, I was able to reset and heal up a little bit and win the gunfight. When you have walls and obstacles around you, you have options if you get surprised and find yourself in a bad situation. You can break the line of sight with your enemy and force them to push you, but now you have the upper hand because they're out in the open, which is never a good place to be.
Wow. Really can't believe that worked.
Okay, moving on to the next mistake. Now, even though slide canceling a corner can be kind of risky, it's a great way to challenge a gunfight when you don't have any information on your opponents because you can quickly get away if you get into trouble. But a lot of players make this fatal mistake and end up getting destroyed. But before I can get to the mistake, I have to explain something. It's called Peeker's Advantage. In every FPS game that's played online, the player who is aggressively pushing around corners will have an advantage in the gunfight because it takes time for data to travel over the internet. Now, the obvious question is, how much advantage do you get? Well, the short answer is it'll be different for every gunfight because it depends on your ping and your opponent's ping, as well as how the developers write the code for the game. We don't know a lot about Warzone's code, but the developers for games like Valorant have said that the average peeker's advantage for their game is 40 to 70 milliseconds. However, we also know that the Warzone servers update much slower than Valorant, so it could be more like double this for us. Yeah, the Warzone servers are pretty bad. Now, obviously these are just estimates, but the important thing here is that while this advantage is quite a lot, you still have to factor in other variables when you get into a gunfight. For instance, if I'm this player here, and I think there's someone on the other side of this wall, if I go to slide cancel this corner, but this camper is smart and instead of sitting on the ground, he's gone up onto the plants to get higher, well, it might take me 200 milliseconds, which is a fairly good reaction time to realize that this player isn't where I thought he was. And it will take additional time to move my crosshair to get to him. And by the time all this has happened, I may have lost all of my advantage in the gunfight if this enemy has a fast reaction time and if I slide directly into his crosshair. So the mistake here is that many players overestimate Peeker's advantage. They challenge gunfights, but they take too long to start dealing damage to their opponent. In order to maximize the benefit of it, you should be pre-firing your weapon if you're going for a challenge. If I know someone is around this corner from me, it makes no sense for me to slide out and wait until I see that opponent on my screen to start shooting my gun. I should start my slide a little bit earlier and I should be pre-firing so that I can start doing damage as soon as I come around the corner. Even if I'm a little bit off target, pre-firing will help reduce the impact of my reaction time because I've already decided in my head to start shooting my weapon. And since Warzone gives us the option to have SMGs with huge magazines, there really is no downside to wasting a few bullets here and there. Now, aside from this, you should also have great centering and aim. One great way to practice this is to find a target in multiplayer or in Plunder and just practice slide canceling around the corner while trying to center onto the target and shoot it. This will be especially difficult if you're on controller because you won't have any aim assists, but it will help you develop the fine motor control in your thumb to be accurate.
The aim assist in this game is disgusting!
Yeah, the 2-time isn't wrong about aim assist being broken, but you know what's also broken is avoiding this next mistake. Now, this mistake is what I think truly separates the great movement players from someone who's just average. Like I mentioned earlier, when I started to learn advanced movement, it was kind of addicting. It's fun to fly around the map and slide cancel back and forth because the game goes from this fairly slow tactical shooter to this insanely fun arcade game. But what happened for me is that I thought to get better, I had to play faster. So I practiced my movement to get as fast as possible and I started playing on Rebirth Island. Now, this fast movement worked pretty well against lower skilled players, but it didn't work in the sweatier lobbies, and I didn't understand why. But what I eventually figured out is that when you play at one speed, you become very predictable as a player. You make it very easy for enemies to read your movement and anticipate what you're going to do. Whenever I'm fighting someone who appears to have decent movement, I know that they almost always are going to make the most aggressive choice in whatever situation they're in. This is almost always some sort of immediate re-challenge as soon as you shoot them in the back.
It's so predictable.
But let's look at this example and change it around a bit. Say I have someone one shot and they're able to get around the corner into cover. I go to pre-aim thinking they're going to re-challenge, but they don't. So now I assume they've run away to heal up and I run to chase them, but as I get close to the corner they slide out and break my camera and surprise me. Well, all of this happened because this player was patient. The most difficult people to kill on the map are unpredictable. They're able to play at a very fast pace and know all the advanced movements, but they're also able to slow things down in a gunfight to throw off their opponents. This sounds easy, but it takes a lot of practice. In this clip here, I'm playing solos and I've just killed a player, so I'm trying to heal up, but right at that moment someone starts to push me from the left. Well, in classic solos fashion, another player comes to third party as I slide out to challenge the first player. Well, now I'm in a tough spot. I'm not fully healed, and more importantly, I only have 20 rounds in my SMG, so I don't want to make an aggressive push on this other player. Well, he makes the aggressive play on me, and instead of panicking, I patiently play the angles on this car to stay out of his line of sight, and then I time a stim play to break his camera and win the fight. And notice how he runs out of ammo, which allows me to get the kill on my last bullet. When you change your speed, you become unpredictable. This is often why using doors can be so effective in this game. A play that I make a lot is when someone is near me, I close the door, which tells my opponent that I'm a slow defensive player, but then I immediately challenge out of the door, which catches them by surprise. You always want to be completely in control of your speed when you play, and you want to be able to go from 0 to 100 at a moment's notice. If you constantly change speeds, you're basically playing mind tricks on your opponent, which can give you the upper hand.
That was like the Jedi mind
Okay, let's get to the next mistake. Now, the reason playing at different speeds is so effective is because Warzone has a fast time to kill. The average TTK in this game is around 650 milliseconds in close range fights, which is pretty fast considering a human's reaction time of about 200 milliseconds. But what a lot of people don't realize is that this is just a theoretical number. My time to kill and my opponent's TTK might be the same on paper, but if I use the one skill that all great movement players have, I can make this an unfair fight every time. Let's look at a clip. Now I'm running through tents on rebirth when I get melted from someone behind me. Now I'm completely one shot and you might think that I'm dead, but let's just see what happens. You see, I was able to get that win because my actual time to kill was much higher than my opponent's, and it's all because I had great timing. My first slide got me completely behind this enemy, and I was able to deal a bit of damage, but because I was one shot, I knew I had to reposition before I was back in his kill zone. This allowed me to get one plate in and then reposition and jump around to eventually get the kill. I also made sure to pre-fire to not take any more damage. A big mistake that a lot of players make is they have bad timing. If someone is pushing a corner on me, there's a major difference between sliding out too early and being in that player's kill zone versus sliding out at the last second and breaking his camera. You want to get good at estimating the distance between you and your enemy based on their footsteps and the information that you have. I highly recommend getting a friend or playing with bots to practice breaking cameras. But timing isn't just about breaking cameras. Winning gunfights often comes down to positioning, and if you know your timings, you can get to a power position to give yourself an advantage. In this clip, I down the first enemy and quickly get surprised by his teammate. Well, instead of immediately taking this gunfight, I know I have just enough time to get to this head glitch, which gives me a massive advantage and allows me to easily win. Remember, there's a time to kill on paper, and there's the real time to kill in the game. And if you have great timing, you can increase your real time to kill and win most of your gunfights. Okay, next mistake. So one common issue that I see with a lot of players is that they still use movement like they did in Warzone 1. Back in that game, when you slide canceled, you reset your tactical sprint, and you could run around the map without ever slowing down. Well, unfortunately, slide canceling no longer resets your tactical sprint, and it actually will cause your character to slow down if you do it too much, because there's a hidden stamina bar that depletes over time. Yet people still spam their slide cancels all over the map, even if there's no benefit to doing it, and the worst part is it can cause you to lose a lot of gunfights. If I rewind this clip, I hear this player above me, and I suspect that he's going to drop down and challenge me. Well, I don't have any cover around me, so I lay prone hoping to catch him by surprise. Well, right as he drops down, he slide cancels into the room, and look at this.
Boom! Headshot!
Yeah, when he slide cancels, his head immediately goes through my crosshair and I get an easy kill. In Warzone 3, the headshot multiplier is huge, so you can lose a lot of gunfights if your enemy gets a lucky headshot. So the problem with slide canceling is you lower your character's head and you make it easier for an enemy to hit it. Not only that, but when you slide, your character can't move very far left or right. So if you start a slide and get surprised by someone, their aim assist is going to lock onto you and you'll be in a really bad situation. If you're not close enough to break someone's camera, you always want to be moving left and right on your enemy's screen because you'll be harder to track. Now the one exception to this rule is if you're extremely close to someone, you can slide cancel directly into them, and this will often cause their aim assist to drag into the ground for an easy kill. But not everyone is on controller, and this is definitely a risky play. So instead of randomly slide canceling around the map, you really want to focus on using it deliberately. Use it to peek corners, to change direction quickly, or to try and make your character harder to hit. Don't just spam it while you're running around because it can put you at a big disadvantage if you get surprised. Okay, this next mistake is probably the worst one you can make. I remember that when I started to learn movement, it was exciting and I wanted to learn it all at once. I learned to slide cancel, to drop shot, to jump shot, and I thought that this would instantly make me a better player. But the reality is that it didn't. Call of Duty is a first-person shooter game, which means that being able to hit your shots is the most important thing in the game. And the problem with movement is that while it makes it harder for your opponent to hit shots, it also makes it harder for you to hit shots. I got slammed over and over again when I first started using movement because I didn't practice my movement and my aim at the same time. Movement works great against bad players, but it doesn't work that well against really good players unless you also have top-notch aim. So don't make the mistake that I made, which is I prioritized my movement over my aim. I tried to learn everything all at once versus taking my time to get really good at one skill before moving on to the next. Now I eventually figured this all out, but it took me a really long time, and hopefully now that you know this, you can skip the months of frustration that I went through. One of the best things that I ever did was I started making practice drills to work on my aim and my movement at the same time. And if you want to see all these drills and see exactly how to take your movement to the next level, you can check out my movement guide right here.